Al Pacino sat perfectly still at Jimmy Fallon's desk. Not nervous, not composed, just still, in the way a man goes still when something reaches the part of him he forgot was there. The studio audience of 300 people had been laughing 30 seconds before. They were not laughing now. Jimmy Fallon was not speaking. He had opened his mouth and then closed it again, and on live television, that kind of silence does not happen by accident. It was a Wednesday night, on the set of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. And Al Pacino had been the kind of guest every producer dreams about. He was relaxed, sharp, funny. The version of himself audiences have always loved. He spoke about his early days in the theater, about what it costs a man to inhabit a character fully, about the years before anyone knew his name. Jimmy kept up effortlessly. The studio was warm with laughter and the easy rhythm of two men who had done this before. The audience had come in already smiling, already leaning forward. Everything was right. Everything was flowing. The segment producer later said she had worked in television for 19 years and had never seen anything come apart quite so quietly. The Tonight Show control room still talks about what happened next. An assistant walked out onto the stage carrying a letter. Not typed, not laminated, not framed. Just a letter. Folded paper, the edges soft from age. Carried in both hands the way you carry something ordinary that happens to have lived inside a wooden box for 54 years. Al Pacino's eyes found it before the assistant had crossed halfway across the stage. Not slow recognition. Not gradual processing. Immediate, his hand came up off the desk. Not to take it, just up. Fingers slightly open, the way you reach towards something you never expected to see again. His head tilted forward half an inch. His chest pulled a breath inward and held it. That was all. No words. Just that reaching, tilting stillness, and then a sound passed through him that was not quite a word and not quite a breath. Jimmy said, "Al, you okay?" The entire studio froze. 300 people who had been smiling and leaning forward in their seats went completely motionless in the same moment. The wrong assumption moved through the room like a current. He is unwell. He has remembered something terrible. He is having a moment that nobody in this room should be watching. He was 84 years old, and he was looking at a piece of paper, the way you look at something that has come back from the dead. A single name passed his lips. Rosa. His voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by his microphone. 300 people held their breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1969. Al Pacino wasn't always Al Pacino, icon and legend. In September of 1969, he was 29 years old and performing in a small off-Broadway production in Lower Manhattan, a theater on West 4th Street, with maybe 220 seats, most of them empty on weeknights. He was not famous. He was not close to famous. He was a young actor from the South Bronx who had slept on rooftops and in friends' apartments in order to keep doing the work he believed in. He had been eating mostly bread and peanut butter for 4 months. He had been told twice that year by people whose opinions he had made the mistake of asking that he did not have the kind of face that sold tickets. Rosa Ferrante was 56 years old that September. She had spent 31 years teaching high school drama in Queens, retiring the spring before, and she had been attending off-Broadway productions her entire adult life, alone, always. Because none of her friends understood why she spent her evenings in small dark theaters watching unknown actors perform for handfuls of people who had wandered in from the rain. Her husband had offered to come once. She had told him to stay home and watch the game. This was hers, and she was not willing to share it with someone who would be bored. She was in the fourth row on the night Al Pacino played a broken man returning to a city that had already swallowed everything he loved. She told her daughter later that she sat completely still through the entire performance, which was how she watched actors she believed were capable of something real. Most nights, she fidgeted. That night, she did not move once. After the curtain came down, she went backstage. Not to flatter him, not to collect an autograph. She had brought a single sheet of paper with her, the way she always brought a sheet of paper to performances, and she wrote him a note in the narrow hallway outside his dressing room, leaning against the wall to do it. She handed it to him without formal introduction, just her name, Rosa, and the name of the school in Queens where she had spent her life. He remembers it was raining hard that night. He remembers that she looked at him without any celebrity in her eyes. Only the plain and direct recognition of someone who understood exactly what she had just watched. She said, before she turned to leave, "You already know the truth of it. Stop asking permission to show us." He read her note in the dressing room afterward. It was a single page, handwritten in careful ink. She had written down every specific thing she had seen him do that she believed was true, not general praise, specific things. The moment he hesitated at the door in the second scene, the way his breathing changed before the speech he was afraid of, the thing he did with his hands when the character did not know how to grieve and had to find it in the middle of a sentence. She had seen all of it, and she had named it. Nobody had ever named it before. He carried the letter in his coat pocket for the next 6 months. He does not fully know why. He searched the program listings for her name in the months that followed, wanting to find her and tell her something, not quite sure what he would say. He thought about the specific things she had named. He thought about them before he slept. And sometimes in the middle of a performance when a scene was not landing, and he needed to remember what it felt like to be seen without any ceremony around the seeing. By the spring, he had been cast in The Panic in Needle Park. Then a role arrived that rearranged the world around him, the way the world rearranges itself around only a few people in a generation. The years accelerated. The ordinary life of cold apartments and borrowed money gave way to something large and loud and unceasing. Fame is the force that carries people away from things they love, and it carried him quickly and without cruelty. He never forgot that handwritten page. The letter moved with him through 54 years of life, into apartments and houses, between cities and countries, through every version of the man he became. He kept it in a wooden box his mother had given him. He had never spoken about it to anyone. 14 months before this night, Rosa Ferrante was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less, her doctors told her. She spent part of those months going through her papers, her journals, her notebooks, her careful records of a life spent watching people become something on stage. Her daughter Carla found a name in her mother's diary beside a single entry dated September 1969. The entry read only, "He already knows. He just needs someone to say it." Carla wrote a letter to Al Pacino's management company. She expected nothing back. Within 24 hours, he called her directly. Rosa Ferrante passed away 7 weeks before this night. The arrangement had already been made in full, in secret, with a care that Carla would later say she had never witnessed before from a stranger. Tonight Show's staff had been told only that a specific guest would be seated in the 7th row, second seat from the aisle. They had not been told why. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Behind the scenes, Al Pacino had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He had asked to be given the letter at his desk, on camera, without rehearsal and without warning. He wanted to read it the way Rosa had written it, without preparation, without knowing what his face would do when he saw the words again. He had told the producer before the taping, "I want her to feel like a person, not a moment." Carla had been seated in the 7th row since 6:15 that evening, holding in her lap the original program from that September night in 1969, which Rosa had kept in a dresser drawer for 54 years, without ever explaining to anyone why. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Al Pacino opened the letter with both hands, slowly, the way you unfold something that has been folded for 54 years. The paper had aged to the color of old cream. The ink was still precise, still careful, still exactly as she had written it in that narrow hallway on a rainy September night, when nobody in the world knew his name yet. He read it the way you read something you have read 10,000 times but have not seen in years, checking every word, making sure it still says exactly what you remembered. A tear fell before he reached the second paragraph. Then another. His shoulders came forward slowly, the way a man's shoulders come forward when something in his chest releases what it has been holding for more than half a century. He looked up, not at Jimmy, at the audience. He found Carla in the 7th row without searching, because he had known exactly where she was sitting since the moment he walked out. He said, "She changed everything." His voice shook on the last word. Carla stood. Her hands were shaking. "You came," he said. "She wanted me to." Carla's voice broke in the middle of the sentence. He pressed the letter flat against his chest with both hands. Before any of it, she was the first person who ever saw it. Not the character. "Me, I know," Carla said. She told me about that night every year. Every year on the same date she would sit at the kitchen table, and she would tell me about the young man in the theater on West 4th Street who already had it but didn't know yet that he was allowed. Jimmy Fallon had stepped out from behind his desk. He was standing at the edge of the stage, not speaking, not directing anything, just standing the way you stand when you understand that some things do not need a host. He said, quietly, almost to himself, "Folks, I think we need to let this happen." In the drum riser, Questlove stood up from his kit. He did not pick up his sticks. The director did not cut to commercial. The cameraman closest to the stage did not look away. Al Pacino walked to the edge of the stage and held the letter toward Carla with both hands, not to give it back, only to hold it toward her the way you hold something toward someone when you need them to see that it is real, that it survived, that it made it here. Carla covered her mouth. She could not speak. The standing ovation started in the center of the audience and moved outward like a wave before anyone had decided to start it, before anyone had thought about what they were doing. It reached the walls of the studio before it had a name. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the cameras stopped, Al Pacino stayed. He sat with Carla for 40 minutes in a small room off the main studio. The door closed. No crew. No cameras. No one who needed to be anywhere. The letter was placed in Carla's hands before she left that night. She had it framed the following week, beside her mother's program from that September evening in 1969, the one Rosa had kept in her dresser, without ever explaining why. It hangs now in the hallway of the house in Queens, where Rosa Ferrante spent her retirement reading in the afternoons and watching the street from her kitchen window. Rosa had died on a Tuesday morning in early October, 7 weeks before that Wednesday night on The Tonight Show. The final entries in her diary were small and ordinary. Appointments. Weather. The names of birds she could see from the kitchen. In all those final pages, she wrote Al Pacino's name only once, near the very end, beside a line that read, "I think he kept it." She was right. The truth a great teacher plants in someone takes root below everything else and waits there quietly, holding the whole thing up, while the rest of the world watches the branches.